So I decided to come back and make another video. Why else is there for me to do? I have been watching some movies lately. There was a few on Tubi. It's a free station that I get. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with it. You spell it Tubi. They actually have some pretty decent shows on there, or movies, I should say. And of course, this movie had to deal with another trafficking issue, more severe than my trafficking issue. It dealt with different people from different countries. The movie is just called Trafficking, not human trafficking, but just trafficking. And I mentioned a human trafficking movie last week, but it was called Human Trafficking. This one's just called Trafficking. I suggest you check it out if you can. It's a good movie, and also based on people's experiences with trafficking from different countries and sexual exploitation and whatnot. It's very interesting. Which this is a big issue with me because I know that my trafficking is a little lower level, still very severe. I mean, as far as like the consequences that or the things that the mental anguish that you go through. But there are some people who are dealing with trafficking with handlers who are extremely, my handlers, I'm going to call them handlers, people who feel as though they're entitled to have some sort of say in your life, who want to dictate your life and this sort of stuff. This really, people who lack empathy, evil people who are involved in my trafficking, but with the religious spin on it, which is funny to me. But these people also are dealing with monsters, like high level monsters, and it brings out a lot of feelings of compassion from me because I look at the suffering that goes on in this world, and it touches me. It does. I wish that there was a way that I could do something and involve myself more in organizations like that. Maybe not necessarily for a career, but like maybe volunteer or something. If I had the opportunity to do so, and if I could get a job doing something like that, helping people, that would be great too. But this is a cause that really it means a lot to me. The squashing people's rights and dictating the lives of other people is something that is very close to my heart right now, and it probably will always be. This has marked my life tremendously. It affects me, and because I've never dealt with really any major issues. I see different charities and organizations, and yes, I feel compassion for child abuse, all these sort of issues. But when you experience something like this, like where people are literally dealing with invading your life and this sense of entitlement, and it's very sick and twisted, and it makes you look at other people and want to help them, because no one, whether it's something relating to your employment or it is something severe, like major, like sexual exploitation, it just makes me want to help people. But anyway, so I wanted to talk a little bit, just kind of, because like I said, there's nothing else for me to do. And I wanted to just kind of get some things out of my mind, which I've been doing for a long time. And look at all my videos. I look at all my videos I've made. I think I'm up to 1,000 now, maybe a little over. Yeah, I think it was like 1,007. I think. I closed my face. I didn't really close it. I deactivated my Facebook account. I probably will return to it later. I don't really have a need to be on Facebook. And so I just decided to deactivate my account. I think social media, I know that, my dream is to find like an employer who appreciates me, appreciates somebody who's going to get the job done. And that's it. I don't want to deal with people's emotional whims and drama and, political issues. I would just like to be able to find a job so I can do my work, right? But some people look at social media and kind of use that as a determining factor on hiring, which I've talked about this issue before. And I know that my previous Facebook account, with a lot of drama going on with my family back in 2008, has caused a lot of problems, okay? And it took me the longest time to figure out exactly what the root of all this was. Maybe my family thought I was living my life, like living a life where I was just like, I don't know, maybe they thought I was like going out and partying or whatever. But that's not the case. They drew the attention to my Facebook account. They did, okay? Like I said, if I was just to appear on Facebook randomly, okay, like I did back then, and my family was not, my ex-family was not involved or looking at my Facebook page or anything, I doubt anybody would have given me this sort of attention. I would have just blended in with all the millions of other people on Facebook. But I decided to deactivate my account because even though I know people are chatting and talking about me, I think people have this misconception of, and they have it confused. It's very twisted. I'm not, my behavior, my mannerisms, as an adult, I'm a very, I guess, reserved type person. So, and I really don't understand how somebody can be involved in, get sucked up in a scandal where I'm the victim, okay? And yet I'm the one who ends up getting bullied, and I do think that racism plays a huge part in this. Mainly because obviously I was married to somebody who led me to believe that this was his mom. And then his mom decided to take control of my employment and kind of start bullying me when I had no idea that they were even lovers. I mean, it's so weird. Like, seriously, it's like very strange for me to even be talking about this. But still, it's like I'm the one who's the victim here, but yet people were turning against me. Maybe because they thought, well, you came in here and you broke up this relationship. Who in the world? Like, I would never. When I first met her, I was introduced to her. He introduced me as his mom, and but yet I'm somehow or another I'm being looked upon, and the reason why I'm being looked upon this is because I think the issue relating to the 2008, and the fact that I dress well. And actually, like I said, I look at other women and they dress far better than I do. The issue relating to my hair, people thought that maybe I was wearing a wig because I was doing it to get attract men or whatever. The issue is that, and I don't want to bring attention to black women, but black women generally do things with our hair out of necessity, okay? But that's not my fault. I'm the victim here. I'm like a total victim here. And so I resent the fact that, I'm carrying the burden of other people's crap. I really am. I'm really tired of it. But I did deactivate my Facebook account, and I'm just, I just really wish to God that that I wasn't in this situation. Like, I really do. Like, I sit here every day and I think, my God, I didn't ask for any of this. How is it that my ex-family could sit there and feel good about themselves? Like, I would, if I put somebody in this situation, I would never forgive myself. I would be up every night thinking what I did to this person, what the mental anguish, the pain that I caused this person. The person is going through pain every single day of their life, stressed out, worried all the time, and I'm the cause of that. I wouldn't want to live with myself. I would never want to live with myself knowing that I did this to another person. So it makes me wonder about, like, especially when I think about the religious issue of it, it kind of proves my point. It's like, I think a lot of people, they don't think much about their afterlife or the consequences that they're going to have to pay. Some people believe or use the excuse or the idea that I'm saved, and they take this as and they abuse this idea thinking that they can do anything that they want to do and that they don't have to have any sort of remorse. They don't have to feel bad about it. They're guaranteed to go to heaven. Well, the Bible says something different, okay? There's a lot of things that go on in religion where it, maybe preachers are encouraging people to do one thing, but when you look back into scripture, it says something completely different. And I do believe that, people should be, what do you call it? How can I say this? I don't think people should be materialistic, and I'm not materialistic at all. I would consider myself to be somewhat of a minimalist. I do enjoy arts and crafts. Yes, I do like making clothes, and I do make other arts and crafts. Like, everyone knows that I like making things with felt, and I make a little wall hanging here and there. And I prefer to make things on my own. I prefer to be, somebody who, I don't know what you want to call it, self-made, or somebody who wants to be surrounded with their own things. That's just how I am, I've always admired women who could bake, who could cook well. I cook, but I'm not a great cook. I find it a bit cumbersome. But, I do cook out of necessity. But I look at people who can create recipes and people who can, like, decorate cakes. And I guess that's when I think about women, or my idea of what women should be. My idea, or what the kind of person that I've always wanted to be, is somebody who works with their hands. Not for necessarily for a living, but somebody who embellishes their own surroundings. Whether that making pictures, and I know I'm not a great artist, and no, I'm not artistic in a sense to where that should be my whole, people should think of me as an artist, because my art is very basic. But I prefer to make things on my own, whether that be pictures, little wall hangings. I even one time looked into making shoes. They actually had a shoe kit on Amazon where you can make your own shoes. Now, that was something I thought would be kind of cool, try to make my own shoes. I do remember going to a thrift store one time after seeing a video on people who paint their shoes on YouTube, and I tried it myself. I personally didn't like it, and I think maybe it's because, you have to have real leather shoes in order for it to actually work. And I was trying to, paint pleather. Pleather is like that plastic, that shiny material. But I tried it, and it really didn't. It looked okay, but as I started walking, the paint kind of got kind of weird. So I'm like, oh, scratch that idea, But yeah, I look at people. I've always admired women who are skilled in, like, domestic type things. Okay, even though I'm not like domestic where I want to be like a wife or anything like that. This is the sort of thing that I've always believed in. This is the way of life that I believe in. I believe for myself, not saying everybody's supposed to, but we all have our standards for ourselves. Like, some women think that they should be, soccer moms. Some people want to join the PTA because that's what they want to do. They have an idea of what they want, or what they believe they should be doing. And these are the things that I believe I should be doing, because this is what brings harmony to my life, doing my own things, so I've made, like, dolls. I've made doll clothes in the past. I saw somebody who posted some pictures of their doll clothes. I just think that I like this sort of stuff, and of course I like making my own clothes when I have the money to make, get the materials and stuff like that. I do go to the secondhand store, and I do refurbish certain things. I even one time wanted to make my own furniture, which I don't have the skills to do. I don't like really working with drills and hammers and stuff like that. But I did, buy pieces of furniture, which I said I was going to actually redo. But, I looked at it and like, okay, then I have to take the paint off. Then I have to do. So I'm not as skilled as I wish I could be. But this is the kind of person, and this is the sort of lifestyle that I choose to live. This is who I am, okay? And and I look at myself as somebody who lives quite humbly. I don't go to major department stores. I mean, I used to, to get clothes for work because, some things that are secondhand are a little bit frayed or whatever, and they're okay to wear. And I have worn hand clothes to work as well. I mean, like if I can find a nice pair of pants that doesn't have holes in it, or doesn't look too faded or worn or whatever, then I will buy that. But I have gone to, like, J.C. Penney's. I remember I used to go to Robinson's May many years ago. But for the most part, the majority of my things are secondhand. You know what I mean? And I'm not one of those women who go and get, like, my hair done at a professional salon or anything like that. I don't do that. Whereas I know a lot of women who do, and nobody seems to be judging them. Nobody seems to judge women who spend money at tanning salons. Nobody seems to be. See, it's all who you point the finger at. And I feel as though I've been treated unfairly because, there's women walking around, white women, for example, walking around town who go and get tans. Are they getting penalized? No, they're not. But somehow I am. And it's all because I have a family who, ex-family, I have people that I was raised by, or, they're my ex-family, whatever, who feel competitive or they don't understand. And I personally think that, my family, and it's like a lot of other families, had a bad example. There was a lot of bad examples, and believe me, truly, honestly, I had issues with my mom when I was growing up, but when I got into my earlier 20s and late 20s, early 30s and so on, I started having compassion for my mother. I did. I had a lot of compassion for my mother because I kept thinking I understood how difficult life was. And so I forgave her for all the shitty things that she did to me. But I don't think that my family saw a good example of how, like, to take care of yourself. And because my family seems to think backwards. Like, they think that there's something wrong with somebody who doesn't want to overeat. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, but some people think because you don't want to overeat, then that immediately means that you're trying to be sexy, you're trying to do whatever. No, it has nothing to do with that. It's just that, I remember seeing my mother being very big. And I will tell you, growing up, I felt a little bit uncomfortable with that. I didn't feel comfortable with having a mother that big. I didn't. Okay. And I'm going to be honest. I didn't feel comfortable with it. I remember there was a commercial many years ago, there was this girl in the commercial, and she was like, she was crying, and she was talking on the phone, and she was like telling her friend over the phone, and her mom was listening in the background. And she said something about, I don't want to be like her. And it was about this woman who had this overweight woman whose daughter was affected by her mom's obesity. And I remember thinking, my gosh, this commercial, I can relate to what this girl's saying, because back then, I would say, like in 80s and late 70s or whatever, most people really weren't as overweight as they are now. I know obesity has become a huge epidemic. It has become huge, okay? To the point where people are really not even fighting it anymore. They're just accepting it, okay? And that's fine if that's what they want to do, okay? And I'm not judging you. That's fine. But I personally don't, and when I was growing up, I didn't like it. I really didn't. I didn't like feeling that way. I always felt like, and that was the first thing that people would notice about my mother, was she was overweight. And I really didn't want her to be that way. I remember there were times where she had a heart attack a few times. She was in the hospital, and then I remember the doctor would encourage her to lose weight, and then she would be doing really good, and then she'd go back into her habits and whatever. And I wanted my mom to be able to walk, and go places and do things, and she couldn't. I remember there were times where my mother became agoraphobic. She didn't leave the house one time for about 14 years. Okay. And I know that my when my father became ill, um, it made her a little bit more active. Like she had to get out and go to the doctor. She had with him. She had to go to certain meetings. She had to get out of the house. And so things started changing for her. So she started becoming more active. Not majorly, but she became more active. And it's sad as it is to lose my father in such a what I consider to be a tragic illness, okay? Because to me, Alzheimer's and anything that relates to dementia, to me, that's like one of the worst things that you can ever deal with. And the reason why I say that is because if a person has terminal cancer, they have time to get their shit in order. They have the time to say goodbye to everybody or whatever. But when you lose your ability to think, when you lose your ability to recognize people and certain things, that to me is like one of the worst illnesses that you could ever have. Okay? But my mother became more active, okay? And, she's not as overweight as she was before, but I loved my mother and I wanted her to have the things that other women had. I did. I wanted that for her. I wanted her to be able to do things like, that I would see other kids' moms do. And it bothered me that my mother was not able to do that. And I also do believe that my mother was very insecure. I remember one time, she would nitpick on kids that would walk down, close to her yard, and she would always be like really nitpicky, and because she wasn't happy. My mother was not happy with life, period, okay? And she showed that in her behavior. And I remember one time I was like in high school and she was nitpicking at these kids that were walking, okay? And I remember like sitting at the edge of my bed and I had my hands buried in my head buried in my hands, like she's embarrassing me, like, and I remember my dad was walking down the hall and he saw me. He's like, "What's wrong, Maria?" And I said, "Mom is embarrassing me. She's embarrassing me." Because I remember him telling me that my mother had an inferiority complex. And I realized that she did. She did have an inferiority complex. Okay? And as I got older, I felt this sadness for my mom. I don't think my mother really appreciated the way that I felt towards her. And I think her behavior towards me kind of shows it. I think my mother goes along with the majority, mainly because my mother, and I hate to say it, but she's an ignorant woman, which is one of the reasons why I still struggle when I say that I'm cutting my family off. I am cutting them off, but there's a part of me that's like, I still feel compassion for my mom because I really don't think she has the ability to think. She has such limited understanding of how the world works. Such a very small understanding of how the world works. She thinks the majority is always going to be right, regardless. And by her siding with Jim Culligan, with the man who she's always criticized, since day one, who was the first person who agreed with my dad when she talked about him using religion as a crutch, blah, 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 blah. But see, this is the kind of stuff that my family does. They're just very inconsistent with everything that they say, think, do, and say. So my family has been raised to believe that this is normal. Like you get to a certain age and you just don't care about things anymore. Well, I still care about things. I still care about things. I still care about life, and I will to the day that I die. And if that's what my family hates me for, well, then I guess they hate me for that. Okay, but I remember seeing my mother struggle. I remember her standing up and blood squirting on the floor. I remember her having to lean on me to walk, okay? Or when she had to get up out of a chair, what a struggle it was. I remember that, okay? And it's not something I like to talk about, but I remember it. And it made me not want that. Okay? Not want it because it's not because I want to be, have a bunch of boyfriends or whatever or anything like that. It was just because I personally thought it was disturbing to me how somebody could let themselves get to this point. Now, I will tell you, when my mother was a younger woman, I've seen pictures of her. She was a very nice looking woman. My dad married her when she was very petite, and everything. But she got discontent with life. And that was a part of her happiness. It was a huge part of her unhappiness that she didn't want to admit to anybody, but she knows it's true, And then my family doesn't understand, my mother doesn't understand what it's like to be a real mother. Meaning that she thinks it's okay or she turns a blind eye at the division that gets created. And I know that I was the last child, and I know that I was the one that was not necessarily planned for. And she resented the pregnancy from the day one. And she inadvertently encouraged the bullying in my family. She did. My family has an incorrect way of thinking. Okay? I personally look at it like this. Like, I grew up eating junk food all the time. Like, and I will say, in growing up in the 70s, we ate sugary cereals. Everybody did. Like, we had Lucky Charms, Cookie Crisp, all those General Mills, Kellogg's, all those things, okay? People ate that kind of stuff, those sugary things and stuff, but we were running outside, we were playing on our bikes, we were very active kids, okay? So it really didn't affect us, all right? But I remember, we would eat, when my dad, we'd go out for fast food, we would eat each kid would get 2 hamburgers, we always got extra large shakes and stuff, and I consider I think my family overfed us. Like, we didn't eat properly. There was no guidelines on how to eat well. I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that my father grew up in poverty. And he told me several times when he was younger, he grew up poor. And there was never enough to eat. If one kid had a candy bar, then in order to not hurt other people's feelings, you had to share that candy bar. And it's like, so he was like one of those people who wanted to hoard food. Like, he wanted to, never ever go hungry. So sometimes they overfed us. Some people would think that's a great thing, but sometimes it goes overboard. Okay, it goes overboard, and I felt that it did. You know what I mean? I didn't like that. I didn't want that for myself. And that doesn't mean that I was being disrespectful or that I didn't love my mother or anything like that. It was just that this, to me, was wrong. It was wrong, okay? If you're uncomfortable with yourself, if you have a hard time getting out of the chair, you have a problem, okay? That's how I look at it. But I never, ever, felt that I didn't care about my brothers and sisters or my ex-family, because, my sister Lisa struggled with her weight for many years. That didn't mean that at the time that I didn't love my sister. You know what I mean? As a matter of fact, when people would make fun of her, when people talked shit about her, I was the first person to defend my sister all the time. Like, you didn't talk shit about my sister. And it hurt me when people talked about her. You know what I mean? Little did I know that my sister was more than willing to wage war on me. See, this is the kind of problem that we have in our family. There's a lack of love and understanding in my family. Okay? Yeah, I do know that obesity is an epidemic, and I do know that there's a lot of things that people talk about. Oh, the food is poison. Yes, the food is poison. There's a lot of bad food out there, and foods that are making people eat more food, eat more junk. The prescription drugs that people are taking. There's so much things that are causing it. It's not a lot of people's fault. A lot of people, it's not their fault. It's becoming, it's beyond their control. Like, they take prescription medicines. They don't know why they're eating more than they usually do, but they are. They're eating more than they usually do, and it's not. They have this appetite that they can't control, and there's certain things in their system that has been built up over the years that is making them eat this stuff. Okay, that's why we have all these problems. Okay, so I'm not I don't necessarily look at people like, oh, it's their fault that they're like that. I think that there's a lot of ignorance out there, and there's a lot of people who are doing things, and it's not their fault. It's just they don't know. There's certain things that are building up in their body based on the things they consume, whether that be certain foods that you buy at the grocery store or certain of the prescription drugs that we're taking, that we're encouraged to take, and it's creating these problems. Okay. You'll notice like 30 years ago, this wasn't the problem. You might see, if you walk down the street, you might see one or two people that might be overweight. Okay. And especially look at kids now. I mean, people are overweight. They're overweight. And there was a time where, you know, they were noticing it, and they were trying to like, well, how do we solve this obesity problem? And now it's like they've just kind of thrown their hands up in the air, and they're like, okay, well, you know, and now you see people are encouraging it, or not really encouraging it, but they're just accepting it. You know what I mean? And that's fine if you want to accept it, but don't hate me because I don't. I don't accept that for myself. I don't. Okay, I don't. And so, and I don't think that people should be discriminating against me because what I'm dealing with is bullying. And it's wrong. You know, it's wrong. So anyway, it does hurt me that my family would do this to me. My ex-family would do this to me. It shows a lack of compassion. And honestly, it reveals who they really are inside. You know, I didn't deserve this. I didn't deserve any of it. You know, and for many years, these people have literally like walked over me and made my life a living hell for things that, you know, really I don't even have to explain myself for at all. Like, I'm an adult already. What I do with my life shouldn't have anything to do with them. I never invited them into my life. And I resent their intrusion. Totally. So anyway, I'm going to wrap this video up. I think I'm done talking for the night. I really am. You know, you know, it's funny. It's funny how, you know, when you're younger, you think that you care about people that you're around. I did. I mean, I cared about my family because they were my family. I overlooked things that they did to me because they were my family, and I just figured we were just kids or whatever. But when you there gets to be a point where you have to look at things and realize, like, your family, it's a scapegoating family. They are extremely abusive to me. This is severely abusive, especially when you're dealing with somebody who has made it very clear that they don't appreciate being put in situations like this, and then they want, you know, to set up these dumb job interviews and stuff to waste your time. I don't appreciate that. I don't appreciate it at all. It's not defiance because you choose not to repeat the mistakes of your parents. It's not defiance at all. Each generation, I believe, should improve themselves. Like, there's certain things that I would never want my son to do that I did. You know what I mean? I wouldn't. You know, there was a lot of things that I did when I was younger that I would never want. You don't want them to be that way. You always hope that they're better than you. You know what I mean? I'm disappointed that I come from that family. I'm very disappointed. Anyway, I'm going to wrap up this video. I hope everyone has a good night. I'll be back with another video some other time later.